So today we're going to be looking at setting up our e-bikes, common problems that happen after those first few rides, and a few setup techniques too. So by law, any bike that is sold in the UK needs to come out of a shop with reflectors. We're talking front reflector, rear reflector, pedal reflectors, wheel reflectors. It's your call if you want to remove them, but if you're using your e-bike seriously off-road, I would seriously consider it, because these things rattle around, they break, and they don't look that pretty on your bike either. But obviously if you're riding at night, commuting on it, keep them on. It's an amazing safety feature. So on the back wheel, another thing you're going to find is a spoke protector. Basically this little disc is meant to protect your spokes and any damage if you overshift or your derailleur gets damaged or twisted. Sometimes if you go into that easiest gear, the chain will go over the top of the cassette and mash down behind the cassette, getting jammed, damaging spokes. These tend to come loose over time or develop a bit of a rattle. It's up to you again if you want to remove it. I personally do, because they always break or they just look pretty clumsy to me. The easy way of doing this is to remove the cassette, slide it off, and these literally just clip on, so you just turn them backwards and just remove it. It's the first time you get out on your e-bike, just testing it out on the road outside your house, you're probably going to be pretty unimpressed with the power of those brakes. It's because you need to bed them in. So the best way to bed those pads in quickly, just riding along, just on and off the brakes intermittently, a little bit of drag whilst pedaling along. Just go steady with those brakes, because if you go flying along flat out and pull those brakes hard, you're going to glaze those pads straight away and they're going to be really weak and it just won't bed in properly. So a way to make that process even faster is do that dragging technique, but try stopping and add in a little bit of clean water, something from a bottle or your tap. Just make sure that water isn't dirty or contaminated in any way. Just with that water, just run it over your rotor, then repeat that process, pulling that brake on and off. You'll feel the brake pads get a lot more bite to them. And maybe a little bit of noise, a little bit of howling, but this is perfectly normal. It just means that the pad's wet, vibrating slightly when you're pulling that brake on. But even quicker than that, try adding a little bit of trail water. This is a little tip of mine, personal one. Basically get some mud and some water in a cup or a spray bottle, something like that. Adding those bits of dirt increases that friction as well between the brake pads. So just try dropping a bit of that around on the disc. Again, there's going to be a lot of noise, but it will disappear once that brake pad dries out. Just remember, when you're out on the trail, after all this bedding in process, your brakes should be totally silent. If you're experiencing low brake power and a hell of a howling, squealing noise every time you pull that brake on, it means your brake's been contaminated. It's got oil on it, something isn't right. The only way to correct that is by replacing those pads and cleaning that rotor thoroughly. So it's always a good idea before any ride just to do a bolt check on your bike. We're talking suspension linkages, your rear mech and the bolts, the cable clamp, rear axle, headset, stem, pretty much any bolt you can see. Just get an Allen key in or a Torx key. Just make sure it's torqued up to the manufacturer's torque settings. A lot of them can be really tight. Things like crank bolts, have to put a lot of torque on, but things like carbon seat posts, seat clamps, and the suspension linkages, you tend to go a little bit easier on there. If you're unsure, just check your manual, or even a lot of components will have that Newton meter setting on them. Just check that before you crank it up, because they do feel sometimes loose, but they're loose for a reason. So we're going to talk about some basic suspension setup techniques. Basically, the first thing we look at is sag on suspension. Manufacturers tend to spec around 25 to 30% sag. Sag, if you don't know what that is static rider weight on the bike. We're not talking about bouncing on that seat. We're talking about gently sitting on that bike, lifting our feet off the ground and seeing how much that shock moves throughout its travel. It's normally indexed on there. It will show you actually how much travel you're using. Or there's a ring you can slide up, like an elastic ring. Just put that up with no rider weight on it. Then once you sit on that bike, that ring will move down the shock shaft, showing how much of that travel you're actually using. Just remember, if you ride with a pack, particularly if you carry a spare battery and a full water, camelback, that's full up with tools, battery, it's going to add a hell of a lot of kilogram weight to your bike. So just be aware of that when you're checking out your sag. So some of the problems you might find when you're out on the trail, if your suspension is too soft, basically means that bike's going to sit in the travel a lot more. Basically, it's going to affect that whole bike's geometry. It'll let that bike sit. You're going to have a slacker head angle, a lower bottom bracket. It's just not going to be that nice to ride. particularly with the bottom bracket load, you're going to experience pedal strikes. It's going to harshly bottom out on any hit, basically. So just make sure that suspension's dialed in. And the opposite, if you have your suspension too hard, it means that bike's going to sit too high in the travel. The head angle's going to be steep. The bottom bracket's going to be high. It's basically just not going to ride very nice. Every little bump you hit is going to be transferred to you. So really important to get those basics of suspension dialed in. So a really easy way of adjusting all that rebound and compression, all those complex things on your rear shock, basically finding that middle setting. The way we do that is basically each click on that shock is indexed. So if you're winding it, wind it to one extreme and then wind it out, counting those clicks as it goes. So if there's 20, that middle range setting is going to be number 10. So wind it back 10 clicks. That way you're in the middle and you can adjust plus and minus each way to your preferred setting. So you're going to find that your e-bike comes out the factory with quite a standard setup on the bike. I mean, the levers are probably going to be right butted up against the grips, probably going to be flat. Your handlebar is going to be in a position that you can also change too. Getting that cockpit set up to personal sort of preference is a really key part of riding your e-bike and being comfy in that area. So you're going to find from the factory your brake levers are actually quite close to the grip, kind of butted up almost against them. They're also going to be quite flat. So what we tend to do is actually move that lever inboard, because you see, like when I go to brake, with my hand fully on the grip, my finger isn't on the end of that lever. What we want to do to increase one finger braking is bring that finger to the end of the lever so it fits nicely in there. So all we do is just slide that lever in, undoing the pinch bolts on the back, and just get it into a nice position. So another little adjustment on your brakes is a thing called the reach adjuster. It's activated sometimes by an Allen key. On the Meguras, we've got like a nice thumb wheel here. Basically, you can wind that in and out just to adjust the reach. Basically, the reach means how far that lever is. You can have it close to the handlebars by winding it in. This helps with like arm pump and things like that. But if you've got bigger hands, longer levers, you tend to find that you're going to pinch your knuckles behind that as you pull the brake. So just wind that out, just so it just feels nice and comfy. Just get it in a position that feels natural to you. So you might find when you're out on the trails that your gears aren't indexing as well as they did when you first brought the bike. Basically that inner cable stretches. The way we remedy that is just this adjustment here. It's called the barrel adjuster. It's the only adjustment on the whole of the gear cable setup now on these bikes. All we're doing is just basically adding a bit of tension to that. So basically every single click on that shifter should designate a shift at the rear. If you click that shifter once and it isn't going up a gear, basically means where that cable's stretched isn't pulling the mech up the block high enough. So what we do is just increase the cable tension on this. You'll hear the mech changing in noise and it will jump up into that gear when it's actually selected, just running nice and smoothly at the back. Just check each click indicates a gear change. And if it doesn't downshift, basically you've added too much cable tension. So just decrease that by like quarter of a turn. Just really minute adjustments on that. Don't go winding it out, 3 or 4 winds, just like quarter turns at a time, just till that gear noise disappears. So when you are adjusting your gears, it's absolutely nothing to do with the rear mech. Basically, it's all cable tension, which is done at that shifter end. You don't want to be messing around with the screws on here at all. That just limits how far the mech can move sideways, up and down the block. Everything is done from that barrel adjuster. And lastly, and most importantly, just make sure that battery's topped up, charged up overnight. You're going to want to spend a lot of time on this bike the next day. I can assure you of that. And that's it. I hope you've enjoyed all these top tips on setting up your e-bike, bedding in, and the common things that happen in the first few days of riding one. If you like what you've seen today, be sure to check out my chain and cassette replacement video here. Also, give us some comments in the drop box below, give us a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so.